Perfect, thank you. Interesting talk, Fredrik. I actually used one of your techniques a few years ago when I hacked Facebook. I was looking for like old techniques, all the interesting stuff at Facebook, and I was looking at shockwave flash. And I actually found that this was when it was going, like Flash was getting like end of life and stuff like that. But Facebook actually had a few Flash files, and I managed to like get bug bounty from Facebook. It was quite interesting. So it's interesting, and it actually has something to do with the things I'm going to talk about today. And the interesting when you're trying to like predict the future, I try to do like every year, like see, okay, what techniques and what technologies are going like to be bigger and what's going away. And it's usually like 1 in 10 or something like that. That's like gets into. But a few words about my talk today is I'm trying to like see how can we, like the things we're doing today manually as hackers, how can we like look into and automate this stuff and see how we can do it in a wider scale, so to say. And who am I? I spent most of my career hacking crypto stuff and the security products. Worked at the military for a few years, now running my own company. And I've been doing this for about 20 years or so. I actually founded a microblog service once that was bigger than Twitter in Sweden. But then came Obama and Twitter got really big, and yeah, rest is history. I'm doing some other interesting stuff, blogs, kryptera.se, a quite famous blog these days. I started out blogging just about crypto, but no one was reading it, so nowadays it's quite broad about cybersecurity in general. I'm also a member of the Detectify Crowdsourced, and I think it's a really interesting and great idea to crowdsource the vulnerabilities. And it's also related to the stuff I'm going to talk about today. Today we can do like external attack surface monitoring. It's mostly like, okay, we can see what subdomains, what certificates there are, vulnerabilities, open ports, etc. And we can see changes in how the attack surface changes over time, for example. And we can get alerts like Fredrik was talking about. And how can we use this information, and how can we even enrich this information even more to get like trying to see some risk, or trying to see, okay, how can we like do a scorecard, how can we do a measurement of the security, external security, with little information. So, and as you all know, we would like to reduce the attack surface. We want to have as little stuff as possible exposed to the internet, because sooner or later someone is going to hack the stuff that we expose. And as Palo Alto research once, they wrote that 80% of public exploits are published before the CVEs are published. So we can't really rely on CVEs and public vulnerability information. And that's also one thing that's, I think, interesting with the Detectify Crowdsourced information, because a lot of things that, for example, I submit aren't public yet, or are going to be public. So, yeah. So, how can we do this? Like, how can we have as little information as possible and know as much as possible about the underlying infrastructure? And so this comes the interesting stuff. First off, we need to know a little bit more about the tech stack. What are the targets using? What web server are they using? What frameworks are they using? What libraries are they using? And this can be quite obvious in sometimes. For example, this example that I have, we can see that they're using PHP, for example. They're using Nginx, Ubuntu, for example. And I don't know if it's possible to see down there, but we can see there's some VP.json, and this is probably a WordPress blog running on Ubuntu with Nginx. And this is quite interesting, because this is a detailed stack information about the tech stack. And we can enrich this information with even more information that we can get on different public places. such as GitHub. Yeah, so I was saying, we can see that it's Ubuntu, and in this case, we can also fingerprint that this is Ubuntu 18.04, because the package information we can look at the package information and see that this is this package installed. As I said, running WordPress, we can even do even more. We can, of course, fingerprint the exact WordPress version. We can look at the plugins currently used. And on this information, we can then use different types of external information. And one of the projects that is actually doing this is the OSSF scorecard. And it takes GitHub repo as input, for example. And then it uses this scorecard to see different types. Okay, is this project doing fuzzing, for example? And what types of security measures do this GitHub project have? And in this case, in this fictive made-up case, we can see that, okay, so for example, they are using two-factor authentication. And two-factor authentication is a free plugin from the Automatic that makes WordPress. So we're using a scorecard in this case, and we're saying, okay, so the repo is at github.com/WordPress/two-factor. And it's running all the tests. And in the bottom, you can't really see it, but the aggregated score for this project is 5.5 out of 10. And this is like, okay, it's a medium. And you can use this technique on all the exposed projects that you are using. And you can try to get like an estimate, okay, how insecure or how secure is this product or system that we're running. And you can look at this, scorecard is on GitHub at this URL. So what's the key takeaways about this idea? Yeah, as I said, with very little knowledge, we can draw some interesting conclusions. And we can do this, of course, with open source products in this case, but it should also be possible with closed source products. We can also draw some conclusions even if the source code isn't available. It's hard to do it on hardware appliances. I haven't figured out yet how to do it, but if you have an idea, come and talk with me. This could also, of course, be possible to do if you have like a virtual image or something like that you are deploying into your environment. And as I said, this is quite time-consuming work today. And as a bug bounty hunter, I'm doing this today, but I'm doing it manually and have tried to like do some of the things automatic to do it even faster. And also, of course, it's interesting to see if this the things that you are exposing, how big risk are they? For example, one thing that is also interesting is because a lot of projects, they might vanish or the developer doesn't maintain the project anymore. Do you have into your organization, do you have like a routine, or how can you catch things like that? And that's also one thing that you could like bake into this. And as the last point here, I think it's also interesting because if we fingerprint the tech stack in details, we can also build our own environment. So for example, if we are doing fuzz testing or if we are doing like analysis of exploit or trying to find vulnerabilities, we can do this into our own copy of the environment. And as we've seen attacks in the past, for example, Stuxnet, it's most probably that the attacker that made Stuxnet have their own environment that looked something like the attacking environment. And this is also you can do in different areas, and also when it comes to web vulnerabilities, for example, or exposed software on the internet. So that was my crazy idea. Thank you.